Welcome everyone to the Wellbeing Webinar. Let me see if I can, there we go. We've got Melissa who's going to take us through and tell us all about the Wellbeing series that we're going to be providing every Thursday, the last Thursday in the month, from 7 till 8 o'clock, which is the UK time, except for in December because everybody will be out and about doing Christmas and festivities. So, Melissa, would you like to introduce yourself to us?
Of course. So hi everyone. Thank you all so much for coming and listening along with us. I'm Melissa and I'm Alström UK's Wellbeing Coordinator. And this is our, as Catherine said, this is our first session in the Welcome to Wellbeing series. So before we kind of get into all the fun stuff, I wanted to kind of just lay not ground rules, but maybe some boundaries for these sessions. So the first thing that's important to know is this is a safe space for people to share their thoughts, feelings and emotions. There are no right or wrong thoughts, feelings and emotions. We all think and feel different things, and this is a place where we can talk about all of those. So there's no right or wrong here. You know, everyone's feelings are valid and everyone's opinions are valid too. Hopefully tonight you're going to learn a little bit more about what well-being is and how we can apply well-being, and also some tips on how to maintain your well-being during the holidays. So that's the plan for tonight. So the next thing I want to do is introduce the Welcome to Wellbeing series. So I'm just going to talk through what the aim is and what hopefully you'll get out of this course. So our first session is going to be all about introducing you to the topic of well-being. I'm sure everyone has different understandings of what's meant by well-being, and today we're going to talk about what that is and then the 5 main types of well-being agreed by social psychologists. The next session, that's going to be at the end of January, we'll be focusing on common mental health conditions, some of the signs, some of the symptoms that you or someone you know may have these conditions. So we're going to talk through things like depression, anxiety, other mood disorders, so you get a really good understanding of what they are. Then the following session in February is going to be all about coping strategies, tips and techniques, as well as, I say, hopefully learning from me. These are going to be fully interactive sessions where I want to hear your experiences and your ideas as well. So there'll be opportunities throughout for you to chip in and add your expertise. The session after coping strategies is going to be focusing on individuals with Alström syndrome. So we're going to be taking a dive into your particular thoughts, feelings and emotions, and we're going to be looking at how do we build some emotional resilience in this ever-changing condition? How do we maintain control when so much of Alström syndrome may be out of our control? And how to maintain positive. So you'll probably hear me talk about this a lot throughout the series. Being positive, I think, can be misconstrued. So a lot of the time people think being positive is being happy all the time and not allowing yourself to ever feel down. But actually being positive does include negative emotions and feelings that are hard to manage. But being positive is knowing that those emotions aren't going to last forever. And hopefully throughout this course, you'll be able to develop what I like to call a toolbox on ways to help you manage those emotions and some of those more difficult feelings. Then the following session, we're going to take a closer look at other people impacted by Alström syndrome. So maybe parents, siblings, spouses, partners, other caregivers. So in this session, we're going to take a closer look at guilt. We're also going to look at developing a good self-care strategy and ways to talk to your child, teenager or adult, because even though some of us with Alström syndrome may have I was going to say have flown the nest, but maybe we've grown up, maybe we haven't. I think that's probably up to the parents to decide. But we're also going to be looking at ways to have these healthy conversations about our thoughts, feelings and emotions, and ways that you can show healthy well-being for your family. So that's going to be our 5th session, and then our 6th and final session so far, we're going to look in depth at what is compassion fatigue and what is burnout, and also how can sensory overload impact you if you've got a sensory disability such as sight loss or a hearing impairment. We're going to understand what is meant by these terms. There might be things you've never heard of before. We're also going to look at self-care versus selfishness. So we're going to take some of that learning we did about self-care from session 5 and bring that into our 6th session to look at how do you balance that? How is it you stop yourself feeling like you're being selfish or lazy? Things that I can tell you now you definitely aren't. And how are you going to move that into self-care and creating some of that downtime so that you don't get compassion fatigue or burnout. So these are the 6 planned sessions. But what I'd also like is for you to get in touch and get involved and tell us what sessions, what things are important to you. Would you like to learn about maintaining healthy friendships or relationships? Do you want to talk about your feelings about romantic relationships, creating healthy boundaries, learning to say no? Anything, we can discuss anything and everything in these sessions. So please either drop myself or Catherine an email, send me a text or a voice note on WhatsApp, whatever is the most accessible way for you. We want to hear what's important to you, and these sessions are for our family and our families and our community. So we want to touch on the issues that are important to you. So I'm just going to take a drink for a second, and then we're going to move on to the main body of our session today. So what is well-being? And I think when we did our survey and we asked all of you lovely people to tell us what you meant by well-being, we had so many creative and interesting answers. People knew that it had something to do with emotions and it had something to do with being healthy and happy. So some people had a really good idea of what well-being meant. Others weren't so sure and wanted to be provided with more information about it. Public England say that well-being is the state of being healthy, happy and content. Well-being differs from person to person, as it really does depend on our personality and what's important to us, what goals we have and what our targets are. It's a concept that's been around for centuries, and we find our first mention of well-being by a philosopher called Aristotle in the 3rd century BC. So he said he developed a concept where he said people should continue to live in a state of contentment, harmony, health and prosperity. And this should be a constant action which would lead to us being happy and living a fulfilling life. So there's this spread that well-being is us fulfilling what we'd like to in life, us being healthy, happy. I like prosperous because it makes it sound like we could have loads of money, and that's all a part of well-being. I suppose that's a part of our physical well-being. So this is the key definition of what is meant by well-being. And I suppose a question that we could ask with Alström is, what do we do? Because our health is something that's impacted by the syndrome. So how do we maintain well-being when our health is constantly in question? You know, we may have a lifestyle or medication that helps us keep healthy, but with the state of not knowing what's going to happen next, sometimes it can be difficult to maintain that area of well-being. But the hope is that some of the modules on this course are going to teach you some coping strategies and some ways to manage that ever-changing landscape. Social psychologists generally agree, and they don't often generally agree, but they generally agree that there's 5 main types of well-being, and they are emotional, physical, social, workplace or educational well-being, and societal well-being. So I'm going to go into each of the 5 areas now and give you a little more information. So the sort of biggest area of well-being is what's called emotional well-being. And a lot of people agree that emotional well-being underpins all the other states of well-being, and that is our thoughts, our feelings and our emotions. So these include things like your self-image, how you feel about yourself, and feeling tranquil and calm. And I think I can definitely say I don't feel tranquil and calm all the time. So I've developed some ways of managing my emotional well-being. There can also be some work to do on your image of self, how you view yourself, how you think other people view you. But this is the underpinning of emotional well-being, and this kind of goes back to what I was saying about positivity. I think a great mistake of emotional well-being is thinking we have to be in a state of happiness. And although well-being as a whole talks about contentment, I think there's space in there for the more uncomfortable emotions we experience through life. And I think it's sometimes validating those more uncomfortable feelings, because it's sometimes okay not to be okay. It's how we manage it and how we let that dictate our story and what happens next. So the next kind of well-being I'm going to talk about is physical well-being, and this is where I suppose we talk about the health and the money aspects of our lives. So that's having security, it's having food, and maintaining good physical well-being can be having a good exercise routine, healthy eating, a good sleep pattern, and exposure to natural daylight, whether this is spending time outside or sitting in sunlight. You sounds like a tomato, actually. I'm breeding vegetables. So that's what is meant by physical well-being. The next form of well-being is social well-being. So this is the role we play within society. This is our friendship groups, our family groups, and the role that we play in those groups. Do we have an outlet? And this doesn't necessarily mean you have millions of friends and you're out every day doing something different, but this part of well-being is talking about your sense of belonging and feeling like you have a group where you can thrive, where you can be yourself, and where you fit in. The fourth area of well-being is either workplace well-being or educational well-being for children. And this is feeling fulfilled in either of those settings. For school, it's being able to thrive, and this doesn't necessarily mean being top of the class, but it means that you're able, or your child's able, to be where they are and achieve what they can, and they've got everything they need to thrive. So it might be that there's reasonable adjustments made in the school or the workplace. That so there's accessible material, accessible technologies, and the person feels like they're playing a fulfilling role in that school setting or workplace. So that is educational or workplace well-being. And then the final area of well-being that social psychologists agree on is societal well-being. And initially, when I was doing research into this, I was a bit like, well, social and societal sound totally the same, because they're talking about the same thing. Societal well-being is looking how you thrive within society. It looks specifically at boundary setting, at those interrelationships, and about how you deal with conflict. So I suppose, emotional well-being is that common thread that runs through everything, and your sense of self, the person you are, may play a part on the relationships you have with other people, the role you play within the family or friendship. So all of these areas are really closely interlinked, and psychologists say that we should have a balance, a good balance in all of these areas. So many people say it's good to kind of have a notebook maybe with these 5 areas written down, or different voice files with each of these areas written down, and think of ways that you can promote each of these types of well-being, whether that be how can you thrive at school or work, how can you thrive emotionally or physically, or within your family group or friendship circle. So these are the 5 main types of well-being. So maybe just take a moment to think of how do you factor. I always use a scale of 1 to 10 to think of where I would rank in each of those areas. And, if any of those are below 5, then that's absolutely fine. But that maybe shows that there's some development needed in that particular area. And hopefully the things you'll learn throughout this course will help you add to your toolbox on each of those areas of well-being. So now we're going to move on to maintaining our well-being during the holiday season. So whether you're celebrating Christmas or you're not, I think this can definitely be a busy time, and sometimes we can feel a lot of pressure to exceed in these circumstances, whether it's pleasing family, having a busy workload, or just taking time for yourself. I think it's really important that we do look after ourselves at this busy time of the year. So these are just kind of a general list of things that we've taken from research and kind of how to manage Christmas, I suppose. So some of those things are making sure you're organised. So whether that's making a list of all the jobs, making a voice note, maybe setting reminders for yourself on what you need to do when. that can be a really important way to maintain your well-being. If you've got a big family or a busy family, I think it's really important that you're not the only person in charge of getting the holiday season ready. So something we did that was really successful in my house is we'd made a job hat, and we wrote down all our Christmas jobs on strips of paper. You could do this on lolly sticks or bits, however's going to work best for you. Or if you've got a pen friend, you could maybe attach different stickers to bits of paper and put them in the hat, and then pulled them out, and whoever pulled out that job had to do that job. And it didn't necessarily mean that you only could do that job. You could help other people with their jobs, but you had to be the main instigator of that job. So you had to do the planning and organisation, and it was a way that we were able to split the workload. Because I tend to think there's always someone in the house that takes the brunt of the Christmas jobs. And by having the Christmas, it was a Christmas hat, by having the Christmas hat, we were able to split those jobs fairly and evenly. Now, I got all the great jobs because I got loads of baking and cooking, which I love doing. I was lucky that I wasn't stuck with like the Christmas hoovering, which I'm not as big a fan of, but it can be a really fun way of getting all of the family involved. Something else that I think is really important over the holiday season is to set really clear and healthy boundaries. I was having a conversation with someone about this earlier today, and we were saying however you want to spend the holiday season is completely your choice. I mean, it should be completely your choice. Sometimes I think you've got family obligations or responsibilities that mean you can't do things exactly how you'd like to do them. But try and think of where those boundaries fall. What are you willing to do? And this isn't just what will make other people happy, but really think, what can I do with the energy I have? If I go out here, does that mean I'll be too tired to do something else? And really think of what's going to serve you, what you can do, what you can manage. There is nothing wrong with saying, sorry, I can't do that. There's nothing wrong with going and having a lie down. And I'm sure there's people sat there thinking, I would love to have a lie down, but it's just not going to happen. But again, I think it's setting healthy boundaries, it's deciding what you can do and what you will do, and then it's communicating that to the people around you. And I think in an ideal world, we'd have that communication and people would be happy and they'd not put up any conflict or any criticism to our plans. But I think as long as you're clear in your communication and you tell people what your expectations are of them, you know, is it that they come round for one afternoon and that's all the energy you have for them? I think it's communicating that clearly and then allowing people to communicate back can be really important around the holiday season. I should have maybe said this first, but I think a really big thing is to make sure you rest, whether you're that excited child as I am, who wakes up at 6 a.m, who's ready for Christmas, or you're the parent that's putting all of the presents under the tree and waiting for everyone to go to sleep before you can finally go to bed. It's really important to make sure you have enough energy to do the things you need to do throughout the Christmas period. So spend time resting. This doesn't necessarily mean you're asleep. You know, resting can be watching something on television, it could be meditation, listening to some music or reading a book. But try and find, I say to people who live busy lives, try and find 10 minutes for yourself in every day to do something for you. So resting is really important. Having a think about some healthy alternatives, because I think Christmas, this holiday period especially, I think there's a chocolate advert around every corner and it can be really easy to indulge in some more unhealthy food. So looking at our physical well-being, you know, having some treats in moderation is never a bad thing, but sometimes it's thinking of alternative ways to make things. There's websites that have lots of healthy Christmas recipes, limiting fats and sugars into food. There's ways of doing sugar-free baking, and something I find really handy is substituting sugar for sweeteners. So to do that, if you have a recipe that has sugar in it, you divide that by 8. So if you had, say, 200 grams of sugar in a recipe, you divide 200 by 8 and then you'd use that amount of sweetener. I'd love to have been able to have done that maths, but it's too much for me this evening, so I apologise for that. But it's a really healthy way of substituting sugar for something that is a little more healthy. And have a treat every day. And I'm not saying have a chocolate every day. A treat can look however you want it, whether for me it would be 10 minutes to read a book, it could be watching a part of a television program, having something that smells nice. You know, you can get really creative with what a treat looks like for you and your family. So these were my tips for maintaining and improving your well-being over the Christmas and holiday period. So I would like to thank everybody for listening, and I'd also like to open up the floor and ask if there are any topics that you'd be interested in us providing a well-being session on. Like I said at the beginning, everything is on the table, so please get in touch, whether that's phone, email or message. I really look forward to seeing you at our next session, which is at the end of January, and we'll be focusing on some most common mental health conditions. Thank you all so much.
Fabulous. Thank you, Melissa. That was brilliant. Really, really good. And I think it's a really good opportunity to think through our own well-being, particularly during busy times, because it is so easy to get swept along with everything and just feel absolutely exhausted. And I think learning to say no is a big one, isn't it? Which I think lots of us really struggle with, particularly when there's lots of things going on. It's trying to decide what to do and what not to do, and think about ourselves can sometimes be the hardest thing. And it's a really good reminder as well that what you were saying right at the beginning of the presentation about, you know, well-being isn't about being positive all the time. And I think we sometimes get stuck in that, don't we, that actually we should be positive all the time, when you know, that's not the real world. And it's actually learning to deal with our emotions when, you know, things aren't going so well is probably, you know, a bigger thing to be looking at. And having those tools will hopefully throughout the series will help each other. So thank you, Melissa. That was absolutely fantastic.